Good evening, everybody. Oh, forgot to turn the delay off. Sorry about that. Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey. So we just had a little bit of a scare because Matthias's laptop started doing weird things. Still no idea what the problem was, right? Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed for it not to happen again. So Matthias, joining us from Paris, is with us.
Yep.
How are you, man? Other than worried about the computer?
Yeah, a bit of a scare in the last 5 minutes, but I'm doing fine now.
Good stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So where are you joining us from? It looks like a very sophisticated environment where you are.
Well, it's just work. I'm talking to you from the one of the 3 studios here at GRM in Paris.
Wonderful. What an honor.
It's mine too.
A legendary place.
Yeah.
That's great. I'm sure we're going to talk about that later on. Let me first introduce Tom Whitwell, also joining us from his studio from London, right?
Hi, yeah. Yes, I'm in the substantially less impressive and historical location of a shed at the bottom of my garden. So very pleased to be here.
Welcome. Nice to have you, man. And I understand it's a very hot day over there.
Very, very hot. You're going to see me getting kind of pinker and pinker and pinker as we're talking, I think. So I apologize for that.
Like the English tourist turning into a shrimp cocktail.
That's exactly what I'm planning to do. Yeah.
Nice one. Good to have you. And Megan joining us from down the street, almost.
Yeah.
Rotterdam, my home girl.
Yeah.
How are you, Megan?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been together here in the studio and done some stuff together, but never talked on the Twiddlers Hangout. So good to have you. How was your day? What have you been working on?
Well, I've had a pretty quiet day. I've been working on an album for a little bit. And I didn't do much today, actually. Just chilled a bit.
And enjoying your new pair of headphones.
Yeah. Yes.
Nice.
Definitely.
How are they?
Yeah, nice. They're working nicely.
Cool. Yeah, it's always good to have a clearer picture of what you're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice. It's the biodynamics, right? The same ones
yes.
I'm wearing. Yeah.
The same one. Yeah.
Yeah, you can actually mix on them if you're not driving them too loud. They're pretty open and honest.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm using them for.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
Cool. So I bumped into I stumbled upon Matthias's music. Actually, I mentioned already in the private chat, and I was like, man, the sound design in this is just mind blowing. I got to talk to this guy, finding out about all the secrets. And then I also found out that you are actually a developer and doing work for GRM, and you were the creator of the what's the name? The one for the mutable instruments, the
Parasite.
The Parasite OSs, yes, the alternative ones. Yeah, I mean that's some pretty incredible disciplines combined. I'm always wondering with people that do the types of disciplines and the different disciplines of work, like being a musician, being a programmer, how you can actually combine these things, and there's not many people who can do both well. You're either a good programmer or a good musician, but you seem to be very accomplished in both. So how does it work for you? How do you manage the time, and how do you how are you able to split up your brain between the two disciplines and stuff like that I'm interested in?
Yeah, the time is always the problem, right? It's the main problem. How to find the time in the schedule. And I had the incredibly busy last year, for example. I didn't do much, so I had to prioritize. Work, which is not music. Music is more the hobby side of things, let's say. It's a special kind of a hobby, but to me, but it's still something that doesn't, bring back the money so much. How I so actually the story is that I bought my first hardware synth and instruments not too long ago in 2014. My first modular synth, and it was an incredible discovery, and I thought it brought the two worlds kind of together. It was not like learning the piano or learning a traditional instrument. It was a little bit nerdy also, so it corresponded more to my nerdy side. And at the time, I was not a programmer, and I was not a musician. I was a researcher in computer science. So most of my adult life was spent doing research in computer science in a field that has nothing to do with music at all. And so I got distracted by this new instrument, and inside this new instrument, I got distracted by this. By some particular brands that I looked up to very quickly, and realized that it was also a form of art. How do you say arts of craft, to be able to make such an instrument. And some of the modules I had, especially the mutable instruments, had open source firmware, could be reprogrammed for other functions. So I kind of embarked into the rabbit hole inside the rabbit hole of saying like, wait, this knob doesn't go as far as I'd like it to go. Maybe I can just change that little constant in the code to make it to make the range a little bit more pleasing to my ears. And then so I was looking at the code at work when I was bored, looking at the open source code, and then at night trying the changes out, and it just got out of control from there.
Well, I'm happy you did, because it definitely adds a whole lot of features and sonic range to those mutables. That's pretty cool.
But I don't recommend doing this. But if you Parasites, to my mind now, is a very old project, and I don't even look at it anymore. I don't want to have a look at the code I wrote at the time. It must be awful. But if you follow the versions, the successive versions on my GitHub page or on the page of the project, you can kind of see still this me going down the rabbit hole. Like, the first version was just I tweaked that button, and that's it. And then the second one and the third one, and then a new mode completely changing the functions and blah blah blah.
Yeah, it's like, but was the main reason to go into this rabbit hole, was the motivation to actually increase the range, like for musical purposes, or was it just curiosity about how the code worked and to find out what you could do with it? Because you started to do it for your own purposes, right? And then you shared it. Yeah.
I'm eager to know your opinion about this, but to me it was the same thing. I mean,
right? Okay.
The same curiosity that brings you to make a patch with some kind of weird feedback loop that gets out of control in a way that you didn't plan to, and the same curiosity as like changing this bit of code there, changing this bit of code, and seeing what comes out. I mean,
Right.
it was the beginning. Now, I mean, to me, it's much more predictable now. I got progressively all the theory and all the BSP and the programming that goes with it. But at the time, it was the curiosity and the musical impulse. But to me, they were both. They were the two sides of the same thing.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. But still, there's only a few people who would actually, most of us, I guess, they accept the range of the instrument and kind of, work with it, and instead of really sort of go in and spend time to increase possibilities or whatever, it's
well, there are more and more of these kind of people. I mean, as the modular synth and synth community in general grew, I think the DIY side of things. Tom, you'll probably have to say something much more intelligent about it.
Yeah, Tom must also be a very curious guy. If you
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But
I think you're right. It is much.
Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying. I think it's absolutely more and more. I think modular is a real gateway into that, because you suddenly lose the idea of having a single instrument that works together, and you have to, as you have to make that instrument every time you use it. And I think that difference between even a semi-modular synth or a kind of closed architecture synth and something modular it does, if you don't enjoy that kind of inquisitiveness on the wanting to build it, then it's just a really difficult fiddly device to use. I mean, it's like you're having to commit to that kind of investigation with it. I think. I don't know. That's the way I see it.
Well, so what made you decide eventually to start building your own instruments?
I think I'm definitely not the kind of double threat that Matthias has of actually being good at making music and being good at making devices or making software, which he does. So I kind of realized quite early on that my contributions to the world would probably not be musical, as somebody making stuff, and actually, anyone wanting to listen to it or on that side of it. But my background's in journalism, so I started Music Thing as a blog in 2004, 2005, and then was just always into music gear and into what can you do with it. It's interesting. And when that whole sort of open source hardware stuff started, DIY scene started, just gradually got into playing with that. And exactly as Matthias describes, you start by pulling this kind of little thread and trying something, and then suddenly, 8 years later, you're sitting in a room full of oscilloscopes and power supplies, and your desk is covered in this stuff, it is. I think it's exactly as Matthias said. It's a rabbit hole, and you just
rabbit hole inside of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And as you learn, I think that's what I found it was such a kind of steep but exciting kind of learning curve you go through, where you do something that seems kind of impossible. I mean, I remember my how I know Matthias is from when I have to do bits of coding in sort of devices I make. I don't feel good or confident at all about the sort of programming side of it. And occasionally, Matthias was this kind of, godlike figure on the end of a Facebook chat. And I'd be like, I have no idea how to do this at all. And Matthias would be like, have I explained how numbers work in computers to you? And I'd be like, don't think so, no. But then he would be like, try this, and it would just like unlock this whole new world of understanding in it. So that process of learning and discovery, and of kind of sharing information as well, I think, it's that. So if you do get into that rabbit hole, you just keep at it, I think.
Awesome.
I think and the main word, the key word for you'll tell me if you agree. The key word for the what you described, Joachim, how you get into this is the experience for us both and for users, the experience of reductionism. So the experience of so maybe in the 90s you bought a Rumpler, and you knew the menus by heart, and you knew how to plug it in and out, but that was it. That was your box. But then you realize that you read some magazines and you read online then, and etc. And you realize that actually the thing, if you open it, it comprises of several different parts that interact together, and these parts in turn, blah 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 blah, and you experience the fact that what you were seeing before as a monolith, if you reduce it to its components, to the parts it's made of, suddenly, a bit magically, I think it becomes something else. So you subtract everything, you understand the different parts. One after the other, and then when you put them back together, something crazy happens, because now you're not using a product, you're using the ideas behind them, and that's, to me, that's it's the key idea of science, right? You break things apart, you mess with them, you destroy them, you rearrange them in different positions, and then the new thing that you get is somehow more powerful, not because of its function, but because of your understanding of it. Right.
That's a really good way of explaining it. I never thought about it that way, but yeah, that's a great insight. That's cool. Maybe Megan, you can explain what attracted you to modular.
Well, not yet the building of it, but the building of modules. But,
you'll get to it.
I will get there. Give me 1 year. No, what attracted? I think the endless possibilities. I think, yeah, to build something yourself and to choose whatever you want, whatever you like, put it together and take out what you don't like, sell it again, and yeah, it's just endless. And it really gave my creativity a boost. So that's what I was looking for, and it worked. Yeah.
Compared to what? Can you tell us a bit about your background? What you did before, what tools you were using, etc., and what brought you to modular, and how it changed?
Well, I was using some hardware like a Minilogue or the Rhythm, and some software also. But I got kind of stuck, because I thought, well, if I make music, then I always had the feeling I had to be able to reproduce it. I don't know why, but for life purpose, I think that was stuck in my head, and was trying to get out of that a bit. And then I discovered a plugin called Cycles by Slate and Ash. I don't know if you know it. It's really cool. It's granular oriented, and I got really fascinated by all the granular stuff inside it. And I thought, well, I want to do that myself. And then I found the R-bar from Instro. And I was like, I want this. And then I slowly got deeper and deeper before I even got one module. And I was like, no, I don't know if I want to do this, because out of protection, I think, for myself. But yeah, there was no way back. And when I got my first module, it became more and more. So yeah.
How did you learn?
Sorry?
How did you learn?
Yeah, by doing lots of research and asking people who I've known since I think about a year from Instagram, YouTube videos, just asking people about it and just do it. So yeah.
Just explore it, basically.
Yeah, just explore it. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what I mean, everybody who builds a modular constantly, it's always a work in progress, right? It's always in flux how you put your case together and what it should do. Yeah. So, what did you have a kind of strategy in advance? Like, did you have a sort of like a purpose for it? Should it do sequences or just sound manipulation, or did you want to use exclusively modular? So, did you have an idea how to approach it? Like, an idea about your instrument, basically, because that's what you're doing, right? You're building an instrument.
Yeah,
you're putting an instrument.
You're building an instrument. Well, yeah. I was drawn to the soundscape and more granular and effects side of it, but I didn't really have a plan. Yeah, my plan was to not go go that far with it, but I didn't really have a plan. My plan was to have fun and to that it would spark my creativity again, and it did. So I was like, okay, so I can expand my modules or I can keep it down, but it gave me so much ideas and so many ideas and made me so happy, so I chose to discover some more modules. And
so did you get everything one by one, or did you get a whole case filled up fairly quickly?
No, one by one, but I think how long ago did I start? I think 10 months. This is from 10 months, and there are already a few modules which don't fit anymore. So but I'm trying to get to know what I have better before buying new modules, because that's also really important to get something out of it, I think.
Yeah, it can become a trap, you know, like because sometimes if you're working in this way, there are always occasions when you think, what if I had a module that could do this and this and this, and that's obviously, or that's usually a good reason to look into something. Yeah. But it can also work the other way around. Like if you're just bored or don't have a good day, before you know, your finger is hovering over a buy button somewhere to to get something that might give you the inspiration.
Yeah.
And I mean that I haven't bought any new modules for a long time. I'm just using what I have, because that's there's no excuse, man. If you have a pretty solid setup, the combinations and the systems you can build with it are pretty much endless. So it's much more fun to just keep exploring what you can do with your existing. I do rearrange stuff, but it's better to just keep on the sort of exploratory road and just come up with new ideas with the existing stuff that you have available.
Yeah,
I think anyway, for me that works like that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's weird how.
No, go on. Sorry, Tom. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I was going to say I always find it weird how people can get very into kind of these sort of single, or these kind of sort of multifunction modules, or they'll be saying, what module should I have for a kick drum? You're like, it's a modular synthesizer. There's a million ways you can make a kick drum move with it. And there's that sort of, I always worry about the kind of shopping for a sound kind of thing, where people are like, I want this sound, what do I need?
Yeah.
And just and that the sort of experience of I find most interesting is when you go into it and like, well, I want to make this, what am I supposed to, what can I do that will make it do that? And that experience of just patching everything into everything, that I always find so kind of, when you realize you can use like a quantizer as a bit crusher, because that's all a quantizer, a bit crusher is. I remember realizing that really, and you were just like, wow, okay, this is being able to use something that has one thing written on it and using it for something completely different is what I've always found so kind of just so intriguing about it.
Yeah, definitely. So you describe yourself as more like the instrument builder and not really the musician. But how do you then decide what to build next? Is it something that comes from your, from your customers, or is it just something that has to do with sort of like a technical insight? Maybe if I can design this, it might be useful for other people. Where those ideas come from?
It's kind of, it's always something different, but it's kind of something that it's something that I want myself, or I'm interested in myself, and that ideally doesn't exist in the same way. So sometimes it's like a really practical, simple thing. Like I got one of these really small kind of lunchbox style cases, and it would run off battery power. I was like, okay, this is fine, but this doesn't. How do I plug my headphones into it? And how do I have a mixer? I don't want to take a whole slot of that to put a mixer in it. And then actually, I also need a clock to run sequencers off it, and I don't want to have like an oscillator or an LFO just to run a clock per sequencer. So I'm then like, okay, I'm going to design a little module that is a little tiny mixer that you can mix kind of 5 or 6 channels into, that you can plug like a Volca or something else into, and it's got a little tap tempo clock at the top of it. And it was literally just, I want this thing for a really small case. And I literally kind of built one, so the mixer part on kind of strip board, which they do kind of prototypes and stuff. And I was using that for kind of a year or two, just at exactly for that. And then you think, okay, maybe somebody else would want this as well. And I always just kind of put something out. So all my stuff is sold through this company called Thonk, who are kind of DIY kind of record label in Brighton. And I will always just kind of ring Steve up and say, I've made this thing, or I'll just send him. Usually I'll just send him one, and he'll get this thing through the post. And I'll be like, I don't know if anyone's going to want this, or if it'll be something. And sometimes he's like, yeah, it's great. We should order, 250 of them. I'm like, really? Are you sure? Should we start with like 100 and see where we go from there? Because I'd hate the idea of him sitting there with a whole stock of them, like nobody wanting them. But other times it's literally I was on Instagram, and I was looking, Soundgas, that company that sells these incredibly kind of rare collectible vintage gear. And they do their kind of spring reverb, that kind of Grampian spring reverb recreation they've done. Anyway, so watching this video, and it has this big flashing like incandescent light bulb in it, just like you have inside a Mini Moog, where you overload the Mini Moog and you get this light flash.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's really cool. I'd like one of those. I want something like that. And just started thinking about it, and thinking about that feedback circuit that you have in a Mini Moog for the overdrive. And literally just thought, right, I'm going to make myself one of those. And I have a little 4U Eurorack module that is exactly that. It's that circuit from a Mini Moog with a couple of other things in it. And again, I was just like, this is interesting, and kind of, I want this. And sort of finally got around to kind of publishing and releasing that was, a few months ago. And yeah, people seem to really like it. And they, loads of people suddenly pop up on Instagram with little crazy flashing incandescent light bulbs in the middle of their modular. And it turns out the overdrive in it is really nice, and it does sound good as well. But sometimes it's just those kind of weird ideas where you just think, I'm interested in something that would do that. And once you learn the ability to make something like that, suddenly you have this power that you can make things like that. Which is exactly the same as with Matthias, who once you learn to write code to make things happen, you're able to do that kind of quite, relatively quickly. So it's wanting something and then making it, really.
How wonderful. I mean, thinking of something, hey, I want that, and then you just make it. That's amazing, an amazing ability. So can you just kind of run us through the process from where the idea happens to a product? Because it's a bit of a mystery sometimes, like we people who shop for these things, they can see all the modules, and of course we know that it's like takes people soldering and trying things out and everything. But what is exactly your process?
So it's really kind of it varies a lot for different things. So you sometimes I will just have a really clear idea of what I want to make. The thing I find really interesting, and I'm sure again, Matthias, you'll have found this when you're designing these things, it's this weird kind of multi-layer thing. So you're designing the actual kind of electronics, which sometimes is difficult and complicated, sometimes is kind of straightforward. Then you're designing the panel, then you're designing the kind of interface, and you're doing all of those things kind of simultaneously, and then you're probably doing research at the same time. So I'll be I'm interested in this thing, I've tried this, but what have other people done in this area that is different? What's the theories about this? Is there history about this? Is there other places I can get those ideas from? And it all sort of comes together. You're doing it all at the same time. That's what I find so interesting. So it's not like I am writing an article and you're sitting and you write the article and the article finishes. You're doing all of these multiple things at the same time. And it often is a very extended process. So it can be, you kind of have an idea and there's kind of things in all the drawers around here. Well, I would have had an idea. You make it sort of works, but maybe it doesn't work. You kind of lose interest in it. And then 2 years later you go, that thing was interesting. Or sometimes you have something that just takes much, much longer than it should take. It's like it takes 2 or 3 years because you get distracted, or because it's that you often have breaks in it, or it can just you can go down blind alleys. You try something, you spend three or 4 months kind of developing something, and then you just kind of lose interest in it and you move on to something else. And I'm lucky in that I'm not doing this full time as my core kind of revenue. So I can sort of say, right, I'll work on this between sort of 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock in the mornings sometimes. And you can spend 3 months doing that, and then you end up with this thing and you're like, I don't really want that anymore. I'm not in love with that anymore. And then you move on to something else, you get distracted, you do something else, and then you may often come back. But I mean, the process, the literal process is you design the electronics, which you might do on a kind of prototype. You might there's a thing called breadboard where you just put the components in, you can run electricity through it, and it's really good for just quickly kind of crafting something. Then you go into this whole process of designing the circuit board in this kind of weird, horrible software that you use to do circuit boards. That is a really long kind of learning process. And once you've learnt it, you get like Stockholm syndrome. So you just you spend so long learning it, you're like, I can't move to another system, and I want to do this. And it's very kind of, part of that process is really meditative, because you have to literally if you imagine a circuit board, all these kind of tiny little traces that are flowing around the circuit board, you have to, as a human being, put them in place. So it's this kind of two-dimensional sort of pattern you're kind of creating. And it's a really interesting kind of meditative thing to do. It becomes quite, you develop kind of quite strong aesthetic opinions about the way your circuit boards look. If I look back at the early circuit boards, they just look disgusting and horrible and weird to me. And if I look at more recent ones, I'm like, oh yeah, that kind of looks all right. And when you're in that, you do it over a kind of few weeks period usually when you're really focused on it. And you start seeing these shapes everywhere. Like if you're walking down the street, and if there are,
like when you play a computer game too long.
Exactly like that. You see like drain pipes coming down a building, and you're going, "Oh look, they're
man,
well, that's a good pattern." And it's a really funny kind of intense sort of. I really enjoy that part of it. It's a really kind of meditative part of the process. And then you send it off to, like I will often send it off to China to get the circuit board made. And you have this real excitement when you're waiting for the first board to arrive, and then you kind of solder it together, and then it doesn't work. You have to work out why it hasn't worked. And then you're in this kind of quite tedious process of like getting it right, making sure it's manufacturable, making sure it's, it's not going to cost a ridiculous amount, making sure. And then for the DIY thing, there's a really interesting thing about sort of, you then have to make something that somebody else can build themselves. So you're not designing for a robot, you're designing for a human, and you want to make it a good experience for them as they're building it. So that's quite an interesting part of that process of thinking. Like with that module with the light bulb on it, that's a really, really simple circuit, and it's designed in a way to be really simple. And it's a fantastic kind of first DIY project. If somebody hasn't done DIY before, they can do that and it will work. It's very unlikely to go wrong. It'll be a great thing for doing kind of workshops when you do that stuff. So it's funny, that experience of trying to build something that somebody else has to be able to make sense of, and the experience of them making it is part of what you're sort of designing, I suppose.
Lots of things to consider. Yeah. It's actually, I'm going to say hi to the people who are watching this and in the comments. Sorry, we're ignoring you. That's what we usually do. But I saw one, I think this is, hi everyone. Yeah. I saw one from our friend Split Radix. Are you using Spice? So Spice, for those who don't know, is this really, yes, I didn't know that's what it actually stood for, but yeah, it's a really sophisticated, like quite old school computer program for simulating circuits. So if you're like a proper professional electronic engineer, you would build exactly that. You'd build the whole circuit in this, and the versions of it I've seen are often like command line, like really kind of, it's like a programming language or something. And no, I don't use that because I'm not clever enough to work it out. I generally use, actually, there's a browser-based, really simple circuit simulator that I use all the time for just like, will a transistor do this? Will an op-amp do this? What voltages should I get out when I build this? And you literally just kind of patch it together in the browser, and it will run like the circuit. So you do that sort of first of all just to see how something might work, and then you might try, because you can do that very, very quickly because it's just sort of software and it's like drag and drop thing. So no, I don't use Spice because it's too complicated for me. Fair enough.
Eagle.
I do use Eagle. Eagle's the thing I have Stockholm syndrome with. Yeah.
So yeah, one thing that just popped in my mind, like since you have access to this wonderful GRM Studios environment, do you draw any inspiration from the beautiful classic synths and gear that you find around you there for your development work?
Well, I'm ashamed to say that, but I've been at GRM for more than a year now, and I haven't found time to like hang out in the studios like I'm doing right now and checking out the synth. I was telling you before offline that setting up the studio for this live chat, I found the Simpy on a shelf here, and I had half an hour, so I plugged it in and tried it, and it was my first time. No, it's really a shame, but I haven't had time. It's a very busy schedule around here, and I haven't found the time. But so the instruments here are in two categories: either extremely modern computer-based, the GRM tools that I'm the developer of now. I mean, extremely modern. I mean, from the modern computer era, let's say, and synths that were brought back from storage or from people, composers at GRM for other composers to use pretty recently, actually. So either very old or very new, but there's nothing in between. So here you won't find. I don't think we have a DX7, for example, which is, should be in a drawer somewhere in any studios in the world. Right?
Is there a GRM archive? I mean, do they have everything going back in history, or is it have they not been good with that?
I don't know the history so well yet, but I think unfortunately they had in the studios at the Maison de la Radio on the other side of the street of where we are now. They had a lot of hardware, but in the 90s they dumped a lot of it because our composers got to go back home with them. Or I don't know. Yeah. Because it was the digital revolution. And if you go, for example, in the studio just the next door here, the Studio A, which is the main spatialization studio, it's basically a computer, a desk, some mastering equipment like I have behind me, and an octaphonic setup of loudspeakers, and that's it.
Nice. Well, do people wear lab coats at GRM?
I might suggest it tomorrow morning.
Yeah, exactly. Dress code. Yeah, Matthias dress code.
Oh, we're very. GRM is a very diverse set of people with regards to expertise, etc. There are composers. Our director, for example, is a composer. I myself kind of am too. There are technicians that take care of the studios, take care of the concerts. We have a huge, for people who don't know GRM, we welcome musicians in the studios as part of residencies program, either for commissions from our own festivals or from other festivals in the world. We make exchanges also of residencies, and we have a big season of concerts, so 3 or 4 different festivals throughout the years.
Are you very competitive with Aircam? I kind of imagine it's like a 1950s gangs. You'd be like, having fights in the streets of Paris.
Fights on the streets.
Thankfully, we're not close. We're not very close physically, so that doesn't happen. Like in the middle of the Beaubourg Square, no riots, between Aircam and GRM. It's kind of David and Goliath.
Yeah. So which one are you?
We're David.
You're David. Okay.
Yes. For example, I'm doing scientific research and development here at GRM. I develop the GRM tools and other stuff and maintain them, but also I have I keep close contact with the research community in DSP, computer science, etc., audio people, acoustics, and we're 2 of us in this position of hard science, applied hard science. At IRCAM, they have a lab of 150 researchers.
Oh wow! Okay.
There's no there. So there was a time in history in the 70s and 80s where there was a big competition between IRCAM and GRM. But I guess each found their own niches, their own ecological niches, both artistically and scientifically. So the scientific research is much smaller here and much more focused on the creative tools, whereas IRCAM nowadays invests a lot of effort into industrial applications of audio technology that they develop.
Right. Yeah.
They have a whole thing about cancellation and spatialization in binaural, etc. They have a whole team for that, and we develop the tools that we cannot afford to deploy such a scientific effort, and instead we focus on the tools that the musicians here in the studios will be able to use eventually.
Okay, so in a sense, your environment is influencing or does have some kind of inspiration for the direction in which the tools are developed.
Yes, it was the case before I was here. I was building instruments for my own music creation or for my own music curiosity, and here it's basically the same. The only difference is that I'm not the only one in my room. In my bedroom coding at night, and I can. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm super excited. For example, of the day I'll be able to install my software or install my own creations in the studios here, and leave the composers that come here be the beta testers. This will be an immense joy.
Awesome. Yeah. So what are some of the new or the current research fields in audio? Because obviously spatial audio is a thing. What would you say? What would you say is cutting edge at the moment? What is one of the sort of really new things that are?
Well, it's a huge area. There are a lot of different things. Music information retrieval is one of them. It's the process of it's what happens when you ask Siri what the tune is and put on your loudspeaker, for example, or search an immense database of music for that particular phrase or that particular mood or things like that. So this is very hot at IRCAM right now. On the analysis synthesis side of things, I've heard recently that unfortunately, I hope I'm contractually allowed to say that.
Scoops.
Unfortunately, a lot of the research in synthesis nowadays goes towards artificial intelligence and neural networks.
Oh, okay. So the stuff that's gonna put me and Megan out of a job, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
No, of course, never. Of course, don't believe what they say. It's not. Of course not. It will never work.
Really? Do you think so? I mean, I can imagine applications for which a generated piece of music will just do fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wonder about those Spotify kind of chill piano playlists.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Or basically Spotify suggesting playlists after the user has searched for an artist, those could easily be replaced by sort of mocks, you know, of something in the same style, which is not by an artist, but by an AI, you know.
Yeah.
I think, but that's my personal opinion, not everyone's. I think it's hugely overrated. It won't be applied outside of what you just described, like basic standard piano, blah blah blah. That's used for elevators.
Well,
elevator music.
Well, and of course, you know, the once these become actual tools available to people, you could also imagine that you know, people like us are going to use it in a, you know, to a creative advantage, you know, instead of just having it generate sort of generic content or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't wait, to be honest, you know.
Really?
Yeah, just to see what you can do with it. Yeah, always looking.
The experience of the software that do a little bit of AI right now.
Well, you know, there's AI baked into many things already, like in some plugins. You know, they can analyze things, and for example, there's EQ analyzation or analytics that you can apply to other things. I don't find them particularly useful, to be honest, you know, but you can abuse them, and that way they become interesting, I guess. But yeah, I mean, you know, most of the, I guess the approach that most musicians take is much more, you know, what can I do with this tool and how can I use it to my advantage? How can I abuse it? What is the range? How can I possibly get out of this range? You know, stuff like you said before with the instruments that you modified. But that is true for anybody who is making music. You know, you just try to, you know, work towards an aesthetic or a mood or a feeling or whatever, and you basically use the tools to get there. And if it means you have to abuse them or use them in a way that they were not supposed to be used, you know, then that's it. You know, that's fine. So that would be the same approach with any technology that you get your hands on. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's hard for AI to create a mood or a feeling. I think that's what's lacking artificial intelligence. You can use it, but it's I think it's not really able to create that as a human can do.
Maybe it will be able to, or maybe it's already kind of on the verge of doing that, but not the kind of mood, I think, still, just my opinion, not the kind of mood we are sort of musician.
Well, I mean, it will be possible to get like nice droney stuff or piano music or even stuff that sounds like another artist or a copy of an artist. But you know what music eventually, you know, in the end, music has a context associated to it. You know, it's the person who makes it, it's the attitude of the music, it's the context in which the music is being played, or you know, the story around the piece, you know, is equally important as what you actually hear, you know. And sometimes your ears can be tricked into something, and you think you're listening to a human, and you're actually listening to some generated piece of audio. But I don't know if that's as interesting as knowing it coming from an actual person, you know, with ideas and a whole body of work to compare it to, and to see the development of an artist and stuff like that. That will all be lacking in.
That's what I meant with the feeling.
To me, conceptually, not judging the result or anything, but conceptually, what I reject completely is the fact that it's not generative music that you're producing with these tools. It's basically all of, or 99% of AI research today is based on imitation. Mm-hmm. You provide a huge corpus of text, of music, of whatever, and you let the computer learn imperfectly from it, so not learn by heart. You don't give it. You restrain it. You don't give it enough memory to learn the thing by heart, the thing that you're looking for. So it learns, but a bit fuzzily, and then you ask it to reproduce badly, imitate badly what it has learned. That's really from what I know, the bottom line of neural networks.
Isn't that the human creative process for lots of musicians, though? How many great bands started out trying to copy another band and not getting it right? Whenever you read interviews with traditional bands, they always describe exactly that process. Like, we wanted to sound like Kraftwerk, but it ended up being Depeche Mode.
Yeah. Like a bad copy is always a good idea. Yeah, I mean, I think nobody invented music. There's no single musician who has invented something entirely new. It's always an interpretation of whatever has come before. So of course you draw from whatever that's around you, everything you've ever heard. And then you basically make your own version or your own interpretation of it, and you put in your own ideas, and gradually you learn to find your voice eventually, and find your way of articulating yourself, right? And so there's always an element of copying what's already there, or using patterns or methods or whatever that have been invented by other people. So there's just no other way around. There's just no other way to do it. You can't invent something completely new. It's always connected to the history of what has come before.
That's the context you were talking about.
Yeah, I agree, but some people make a big step. I see Tom looking doubtful. What do you think? I mean,
I think it's the other interesting thing about it is once it's a computer, it is infinitely scalable. So you could, if you write something that can generate plausible music, say plausible Western pop music, you can then say, right, press this button, give me 4.5 million of them.
Mm-hmm.
And you can say, right, we've got Spotify, and we then run it into a classification and recommendation engine, and then you've got 4.5 million songs generated, in a couple
sure,
of
and there's definitely a business model in that, because the accounting doesn't need to be to an actual artist, but to the not even if Spotify would do that themselves, invest in that technology, and I'm sure they are.
Yeah. If you can make 4 million songs by pressing a button, then you can. If you get paid 0.03 per stream or whatever, that's great business. That's really good. But it would be interesting. What we don't know is whether that would be, even if kind of musically, technically, it was like indistinguishable from music made by a human, would it work as something people would want to listen to? Would people build that emotional connection? Would people define their personality through that? All the things that music gives people, if you were able to just generate it. Yeah,
because there's no culture behind it. It's just the audio, basically the artifact, and not the culture.
Yeah, and it may be that people are mostly buying the culture.
Yeah,
it's certainly it's a pretty good chunk of it anyway, isn't it? It's not
Well, but Tom, the business model is not paying the 0.3 cents to the generated music. It's not having to pay the artist. That's the so not having to account to all the time. Yeah.
And I did think it was so fascinating, that story with those playlists, where it was somebody analyzed those kind of ambient chill or the kind of lo-fi beats playlists where you don't necessarily know who the artists are. It's not like hits at all. And they found all these artists within them that don't exist anywhere else. And whether they just pay a session person to record it, you can see, they can produce that infinitely, I think. Because at the moment, if somebody gets on one of those playlists, suddenly they are getting streamed really significantly amounts and must be making literally tens of pounds from it.
Literally tens of pounds.
But let's talk about actual artists, or people with ideas. So maybe I'm interested, Megan. When I hear you play, you seem to be drawing it from thin air, and you're always like very much going by your intuition. Do you have when you start working on something? What is your starting point?
Oh, my starting point. Well, sometimes it starts when I just want to empty my head, and I have this idea, and I'm like, okay, I just want to chill out for a bit in soundscape, and then I create something, and I hear new things in my head. So that's why I wanted the Westlicht Performer sequencer, because then I can easily dial in what I hear in my head. It looks a lot like Ableton, I think. Well, at least that's how it works for me. So that's the part I like, dialing in what I hear in my head, and then there's a part left to just experiment further and further until.
So you hear things in your head. So is that because there is already something going on, or do they just pop into your head out of nowhere?
Yeah, they pop into my head when I usually start with a soundscape-ish thing. So it's often Morphogene or the R bar, and then or I record some synths or my electric guitar into them. That's also something I really like to do, and then I mangle it, and I just hear a bass line, for instance, and then I dial that in, or sometimes I'm like, well, let's see what Marbles does. That generates stuff for you, and then ideas pop into my head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
so it's not.
Do you feel you can actually? Because I know that feeling. I sometimes, especially when you have something going already, you can sort of imagine these things that can go along with it. But I never get it exactly like that.
Yeah. It's. I think it's part of the process. Sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes you make a mistake which turns out to be great, and you're like, that, and then you're I don't know. I think it mostly works like that for me.
Mm.
I never think up front. I'm going to make this and follow those rules, or I mostly do what I feel at that moment. And well, lately it has been a lot of if you want to put a label on it, ambient stuff, but it can also go somewhere like a techno song, or it depends on what my mood is.
Right.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, and it's a really I like this that sometimes I worked with you. It seems like that you are just coming up with things, and there must be something subconscious going on as well.
I think you might see me constantly thinking, and it's just how I work. I'm constantly thinking and hearing stuff in my head, and I think that's really cool, because I'm making some kind of a trip too while making music. But it's what is hard for me is finishing something, because I'm always creating, and then when it comes to finishing stuff, that's. But I think what your way of finishing something is just do it as fast as possible after you've made the music, right? You told me when I came to Stoor Lab that you like to finish things as quickly as possible, because otherwise they will be there for a few months, maybe.
Well, as soon as possible doesn't mean it. I give myself a limited amount of time, but I take care of the fact that I always need to retain the motivation and inspiration towards, all the way towards the end,
Yeah.
And if at some point I start losing that, the initial feeling or this motivation or this momentum, then I know I should either bin it or finish it as quick as possible, or just leave it like it is in the state where it's in at that moment, because you can cross over a line where you are basically just spending time making it worse, and program all the life out of it, and kind of ruin, killing the initial spark. I really want to retain and capture that spark that I had when I started it. And sometimes that means that I need to finish it quickly, and other times it means that I just have to make choices what stuff I'm working on and what stuff to not bother about,
Yeah.
But I have I basically the knowing this, I spend time thinking about setups and patches and stuff like that in advance. So that's a whole different stage of how I make things. So I first put a setup together, and that's a very enjoyable process by itself. It's like like the pre-fun. Like things like what would happen if I do this or that, and if I put these things together and run this through this and manipulate it with that, and it's stuff like that. That's like. That gives me like joy just to think about it without ever hearing what it's going to do, but just think about these the possibilities you can sort of dream up, and they kind of already steer the music in a certain direction, because you've chosen to start with a certain system, or an instrument or a patch or whatever you would call it. And then because it is all well laid out and the patch is fresh, you know everything about it. Because sometimes if you make something too big or you leave it around, you have to kind of remind yourself how it was working, And I like to do it with a fresh system, and then I just go to the intuitive part and just block my thoughts and just basically act intuitively. And just find, explore the range of the instrument, explore what I can do with it, and find things. And that comes together quite quickly, because I made a choice just to focus on this thing. I don't get distracted by what if I could do this or this or this. I just keep, I just stick to what I've chosen as the instrument or as the setup. And that way things come together quite quickly. I like to, it also sort of flows and happens sort of intuitively and naturally. And I often find stuff that come together in this way the most enjoyable to listen to, because it has this, oops, we lost, okay, oh, well, let's hope he comes back.
I didn't
Tom,
see
Tom, where are you? Anyway, so that's he's back. Hey, you're back. What happened?
What happened then? But,
Okay. Well, it was just a 2-second scare, so let's forget about it. Anyway, so yeah, I like to capture a moment, like a moment in time, where things just happened and were not too planned out and not too much thinking. And as long as I capture these moments, I can decide afterwards to really enhance what's going on and to layer it and spend time on the manipulation of the sound and the mix and the depth and stuff like that. So but at least it has this initial spark, this spontaneity captured already. So that's what I mean by fast.
But I'm curious, where do you draw the line? You seem to make a distinction between like creating, making music, and then finishing. What's the artifact, for example, from the first step? What do you get out of it very concretely? Like, is it a 2 hour jam?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and it can be 2 hours of evolving stuff. Like it basically, it starts in one form and it gradually morphs into something else, and it ends up as something completely different. But it can also be working towards a more structured and a more sort of intricate version of what I started out with, you know. So it could be just one idea which is sort of building and becoming more complex towards the end of the jam. That could be, but it could also be something completely different the way it started out. It's basically just exploring, you know. You just let the music guide, and sometimes, you know, or very often when you start with something that sort of already points in a certain direction, and then you just try to enhance it and you know, make the idea more pronounced or more articulate.
And are you doing that is that done fundamentally in a live way? So when you talk about it
in real time, in real time, yeah.
Because that's presumably quite a different approach from lots of musicians would work in a much more kind of programming loops computer kind of way, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, it can be it can be loopy, you know, but it is not. It can also be incremental, but it's still all happening in real time, because I want to capture those movements that happen during the, you know, it's like a performance, and some, you know, you can, of course you can get the same type of movement when you are doing all that in post, or when you've already recorded your multi-track or your stems or whatever. But I just don't like that process, you know. You're spending ages and ages, you know, moving dots around and shit like that. You know, that's just boring. I'd rather capture a live performed version of that, and when it's done, it's done. You know, when I feel it, I'm happy, and then I don't have to do anything after that. You know, but, you know, except to enhance the sound and, you know, getting rid of problems, and, you know, maybe even moving things around, you know, from elsewhere in the recording, you know. But it gives you like a lot of material to work with, and it's all recorded in real time. So you know, even if you spend 2 hours jamming on something, you have shitloads of stuff to work with, you know.
And have you always worked in that way, or is that something that's changed over the years?
I started with hardware sequencers, and then I moved to, you know, Atari Cubase and, you know, trackers and stuff. And I've always had the computer involved as to work on timeline, you know, be able to work on a timeline. But most of the time, even if I had that to my disposal, most of the arrangements that I've done for all of the music that I've done have some form of, you know, working on the desk dub style, muting things and affecting things, and capturing a performance along with whatever was programmed.
So it hasn't changed that much.
Yeah, the tools have changed, but I just like the act of capturing a moment, you know, and it's very hard to capture a moment if everything is just, you know, punching in dots and.
Because I always remember seeing, like, when the drum and bass people were starting in you know, seeing that idea of that kind of hyper edited, what seemed to me, and never having done it and never been kind of involved in that scene in that way, but that idea of creating these kind of hyper edited chunks of music, it seemed like an incredibly different approach. And I think it's interesting because you talk to so many musicians. How is your approach common to lots of people working that same way, or are there kind of 2 or 3 different ways people work, or there are 100 as many musicians as there are?
Yeah, everybody has their own method, you know. I don't know anybody who has the exact same approach, but I think in recent times, with so much, you know, affordable hardware being available and modular systems, a lot of people have moved to recording things in somewhat live, you know. Like I mean, it's inherent to the machines you're using, right? If you have machines that you can program in step mode and have looping, and, you know, then it's just an easy way to start your idea basically. And of course, you can once it's inside a computer, you can chop it up and spend as much time as you want, making it really very, very complicated. I've done that too. I've done a lot of hyper editing type things as well. But they were basically then put together from chunks that had somewhere in the process some performance aspect to them. And I think that's true for most people. I think there are people making things exclusively inside the computer by drawing things and copying things over and repeating things and stuff, on a micro scale even, but and most people I talk to have some performance element somewhere in the process.
And I was really wondering whether that's a similar approach. Whether that's something you do.
I don't know. I have to ask you more questions before I can answer that.
No, but I mean, let's say your the music you release, right? It's there's a lot of attention paid to sound design. But is it? Are you never ever during the process, improvising with like sweeps of sounds, or laying things down with your hands, or is everything just building blocks and stuff like that?
No, it's 99.99% of the time it's little chunks, not even complete jams as you described, but little chunks of interesting sounds that I record and put into a database of like they can be half a second or half an hour, but I have a whole database of these patches that were interesting at some point, played live, or just like turning on the modular and going to the bathroom and coming back 5 minutes after and pressing stop, not knowing even what happened before in the meantime. But it's always that. It's always chunks of sounds. I realize now that it's a very GRM way to create music. You have a collection. Your wealth is your collection of sounds, of sound objects that are not music objects already, just sounds that are interesting in some form, and then I basically forget about them. I put them on a hard drive. They lay down for months, years, maybe. And when I completely forgot where they're coming from, like what created them, where I recorded them, what was the patch, etc. Can I allow myself to use them? I very rarely do some kind of improvisation or patch that's a musical idea from the start, and then directly make us a piece out of it.
So it's more like collaging, the way you work, making a collage.
Yeah, you could say that. Yeah.
But still, you say that some of the stuff that you record is coming from you tweaking a patch. So there is this performance thing, but it's sort of it comes into the music eventually, but without a direct relation to the other stuff that's going on. But it does have some kind of human input. The original sound,
because the sound is interesting, not because I'm hearing music.
No, okay. Right.
If I tweak the thing, if I input something myself, it's very rarely because I can imagine the full music, but the most often because it's yes, it's a space. It's a multi-dimensional space. Each dimension is a knob or a part or a function, and it's a space that I'm exploring. not so. I'm tracing a little path inside this multi-dimensional space, and it's not music related yet. It's pre-music. But what I struggle, the question I wanted to ask you all, I guess, is what I struggle the most with is where in the creation process does structure arise? Like, how does it emerges? I mean, Megan, you were describing like layering sounds and finding moods that you like, and it's very easy with the modular synth to have or not very easy, but I mean, it's accessible to like recreate some mood that you like. But then to make a song, to make a piece, you have to have structure or decide not to have one. But for you guys, where does that happen? At what step in the creative process does it happen?
That's a good question, Megan. Do you
Yeah.
Can you talk about this?
I think for me, it's happening while I'm creating. So I'm building stuff together. So you could see it as a big loop full of different modules, different sounds or soundscapes or drums, and then I try to do that live also. So I use my intuition, I think, to build it. Pre-music is my genre. I pull things out again and put stuff back in again, and then I don't know. It's just.
Would you put this finishing in the finishing step of the process you were talking about before, or in the main creative one?
I think in the creating part, not so much, but when I'm planning on making it a track, then I will start with one element and then I gradually add stuff, or it depends on the mood and my intuition. So that's why I also think the first recording is always the best, because it's capturing your feeling. I have one example. When I recorded my first live set for YouTube, I had to do that, I think, 6 times because of problems with my laptop, problems with everything. And then after 6 times, I was like, it took the life out of it a bit. It still sounded okay, but the first moments when you are creating it is the best, I think. It's just a feeling of when you can take stuff out, or when you put certain effects on it to create this space. And so it's part of the process, but also
I guess I have a similar way of, because you ask where the structure arises. Well, sometimes because of the nature of the instruments, you start out with something that repeats, and you think of changes that kind of need to happen at some point, and then you can go about it and kind of slowly move towards this sort of other state of where you think this music could go. And then in the end process, you could decide, okay, let's just, make this transition more abrupt or even slower, or that is something that is it's pretty much open till the end in my case. So the actual order in which things happen, I have an intuition for it, but it kind of reveals itself. It's like. Yeah. There needs to be attention throughout the whole thing. There needs to be a story or something, a dynamic in the way it develops. And if sometimes that can be very literal, like hard scenes, like going from one scene, one space into the other one. and sometimes it's nicer for that particular piece or of music to just gradually move from one scene to the other. I describe them as scenes because, you know, if you have a combination and a setting of sounds, I often think of them as a space, you know. Okay, so now I'm here. This is what's happening. This is what it looks like. You know, you have something left, right, front, back, up, down. You know, like even if it's not really that way, but it describes like a scene. You know, it's like you are somewhere, and then you can feel the need to radically cut like a movie to, you know, a completely different scene, or or just maybe just morph slowly into the other space, you know. That can be, you know, if that's what it requires to keep it interesting, then that's the choice, you know. It is whatever keeps it interesting, basically. And you know, because the music itself, or the process causes the elements of the music to emerge, kind of, because it's being performed in a way, or there's a live element to it. These things also emerge. These things also arise. You know, like oh, maybe I can do this with the structure. You know, and then you know. Or you have this feeling, okay, now this space is interesting, but something radical needs to happen, so I need to create another one to come after this one. You know, something like this. I mean, it's all very described in you know, fluffy terms, the way I'm saying it now, but you know what I mean, right?
Yeah, definitely. But so that decision of changing spaces, changing radically space, for example.
Yeah.
Do you have to know the idea of the whole song in order to take it? You know
yeah, I know what you mean. Well, I mean that is another thing that is sometimes, most of the time actually, is just also just an intuitive thing, you know. So. Yeah, like, I mean, it's inherent to the way it is coming together that most of the things, you know, I'm not following like composition. It's not written out in advance and then I'm performing it. It is basically coming along during the ride, you know. And yeah, it is just the imagination that tells you what would happen if I make this move or this change, and then you try it out, and if it works, it works, and if it doesn't, you try something else, you know. So there is a, yeah, I would say it's 90% intuitive, and you know, of course, you know, if you spend a lot of time creating stuff, you develop like for more intuition for where things should go, you know. Because I don't know about you guys, but you know, when you're working with your imagination, you get like this intuition about how things should be in your head, or where things belong, or how you can develop things, you know. There are certain ways to make it all work, you know, and that is something you become better at when you have more experience. You know, the key thing is to always keep an open mind. Okay, if I do this, what would happen, you know, and just explore that aspect of making music.
Because there's also that, there's the flip side of that, which is when you realize you're just doing the same moves over and over again, which is certainly something I found with things like when I do writing. When you're writing articles, you realize, I was actually writing a whole bunch of articles for a book recently, and I read back over them and realized that 3 of them essentially had exactly the same intro. And at each point I'd written them, and I thought they were an interesting, you know, imaginative way to express what I was saying.
Writing's
but
about,
it was just.
So what did you do? What did you do? Did you end up changing?
I just got rid of the
Right. Yeah. Well, that's the same. That's the same with making music.
The first one as well, because I realized it was a mistake as well. It's like.
Yeah, but it's exactly what you described, Tom. It's the same thing, you know. Once you realize, actually, you know, I've pulled this trick before, you know, I'm repeating myself. You know, that can be a very good reason just to bin it, you know, and just to start over and do it, you know. And there's always the hunger to. I mean, you know, there's nothing is as bad as the feeling you get from you know, of yourself, that you're doing a thing that you you're doing a trick, basically, or
Yeah.
you're repeating a pattern that you've done before. So there's, as soon as you start recognizing that, as soon as you get that smell, oh shit, I've been here before, then it's like, okay, let's take a different turn, see what happens. It's
But
the
it's
same inquisitive or sort of curiosity that drives that, I guess.
I just thought it was interesting, that balance between the learning and the experience and the, as you said, you're training your intuition almost, which feels like it's training it to make better decisions in some ways. But at the same time, you're at the same time building a repertoire of decisions you're making. There's a real balance between those two things. I always feel, between the things you learn and you're good at and you're expert in.
Yeah, but when it comes,
when you're just,
I know, but I don't think it's bad or it hurts to kind of develop this vocabulary of solutions, and if it is still up to your mood or your ambition or whatever you would call it, to use them or not. If you feel like you're sometimes you can use a trick that you've used before, if it's not really bothering, or you're using it in a different context and it's fine, it's disguised as something else or something, that's fine. But if it's obviously the same thing and you're repeating yourself, you can still do that. But if that's not, if you put the bars, higher than that, then you decide to, to sort of go back into your imagination and pull something else, if you know what I mean.
I think that vocabulary of solutions is exactly the right. It's learning the palette, isn't it? Learning the things you can do at each point.
I'm gonna do a T-shirt with that vocabulary of intuition. Yeah. So, but okay, let's go back to Matthias then, because if you are assembling things from like a library, is there still like a room for intuition, or is it purely a very rational way of putting things together then?
It's not rational at all. It's very much not. Megan, it's funny. Exactly. Megan, you were fading out as the sun was setting.
I was fading out. I'm back again.
Anyway, no, it's not rationalized at all. I mean, especially when you re-listen to these little bits, to this library of sound that you have no idea anymore where they're coming from or what created them, etc. Then the only thing that matters is what happens if I layer this on top of this, or if I could put them side by side. What will happen to my ear? And it's not rational at all. It's just a conversation between your ears and the material that's not really yours anymore. You see what I mean? It's not. I mean, when I listen to these sounds again after a long time, they're not mine anymore. They're just sounds on a hard drive, and they don't mean anything to me. I don't know when I created them, what mood I was in at that time. So it's very much a process that's radically intuitive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because because the context is already stripped. It's like you can use them as something entirely new. Yeah.
So
do you also have a certain way of archiving the things you make? Because how do you do that?
I mean, to me, the worse it is, the better it is.
Okay, so you like to stumble upon things, like you like to rediscover them.
If I start,
so they're all on your desktop then.
Yeah.
Something like that. I mean, pretty much. if I start to, I started this process before of like labeling things and putting keywords and moods, etc. And it never works. It never works because then you're searching for a special mood, and you're searching for a special, and you're going, you're leaving out all of the discoveries, and basically not even that, but you're leaving out even the thing that you could have done because the labeling is never perfect and depends on the moment where you're making it. So
you narrow down the amount of possibilities if you just restrict yourself to one category, of course.
So it's just about discovery also for you, rediscovering.
Yeah.
Do you know that's the story of Williams Mix by John Cage?
Yeah.
It just reminded me, you're talking about the way so he wrote a score, which is a full size. It's all on tape and it's all cut tape. So he wrote the score, which was showing exactly how you would edit the tape with like tiny little tape edits, like, less than a centimeter across. And he drew the tape edits full size. So the score is pages and pages of it's like about 6 minutes or so, the finished piece. And then he got somebody to compile a library of sounds in different categories. So he had like sounds of nature, sounds of musical instruments, sounds of amplified small sounds, all this kind of thing. And it was Louis and Babe Barron did a lot of that recording for him. This was in the 50s, I think. So they end up with this mass of tape with sounds recorded on it and this score, completely detailed, that's been drawn out with no notion of what's on the tape. It will just say like, this is a type 1 sound, this is a type 2. And then him and like, I can't remember who was in the group who did it. It was like 3 or 4 people spent 3 months, I think, literally editing this
piecing
tape,
it together,
like piecing the whole thing together, not randomly, not chaotically, according to this plan that he had laid out. And the people who did it are like, they're famous artists, I think. Well, I can't remember who was in the group, but they spent all this time doing it. And then they end up with this piece of tape that's about 6 minutes long. And I mean, when you hear it, it is a really extraordinary sounding thing. I mean, it's extraordinary now. What it must have sounded like in the 1950s when they, because I think we can all electronically kind of imagine, okay, if you just cut across a whole bunch of random sounds very quickly, you can kind of imagine what it sounds like. But just as an undertaking, it just seems like such an extraordinary thing. And that's when you just turn off the intention.
Yeah, I mean, the radical thing about that is that, I mean, we all do things like that, we put things on random and just see what happens, but it's basically one push of a button to put things in random mode, and you can kind of stumble upon really nice ideas. But if it takes 3 months to actually, to then find out if it sounds like shit, you've wasted 3 months. It's it's a pretty big, investment in the whole work to do it like that. But it's I admire that, to be honest, but
I'm still talking about it.
But what if it? yeah, absolutely, yeah, of course. But I mean, it's there's a risk associated to it.
But that,
if it turns out,
there's another interesting thing I wanted to ask you about as sort of proper practicing musicians. One of the things I'm really interested in is about repetition and sort of the effect that has on the way people perceive music. So there's a Brian Eno story where he records like 4 minutes of him wandering around kind of Hyde Park or something in London, just like a field recording. And then he listens to it over and over and over and over again. And he described how, as he learnt it, and it became repetitive and it became a piece of music or a piece of sound that he understood, it developed a whole kind of narrative, it developed emotional resonance, it developed So he would know something was about to happen, and he would respond to that in some way. And I just thought that was so fascinating, the idea of taking an arbitrary piece of sound and converting it into music by listening to it lots of times. And I wondered what your impressions of that, because you must have that experience if you've listened to a piece of music lots of times when you're creating it.
Oh, yeah.
And somebody else hears it for the first,
Yeah, well, first of all, it is interesting to fiddle around and explore when something that is repetitive is obviously repetitive. Because if you loop something for half a second, it's obviously it's almost stuttering, and it's obviously repeating very fast. But when you lengthen the loop, where's the point where something becomes something like not a loop, like when do you lose the feeling of this thing being repetitive?
When does it become a verse?
Sorry?
When does it become a verse or a chorus rather than
Yeah. I mean, well, that's one thing that you can experiment with, but of course, if you loop anything, you loop becomes musical at some point, and there is just a maximum to how long the loop can be for it to stay a story or a musical thing, I mean, I don't think that is. I mean, that's just the way you perceive things and how much you can remember about the first pass of the audio or something that you can actually capture in your brain, So if you loop something that is 5 minutes, you have to listen to it for days until you start recognizing the pattern, But I mean, anything between a second or a few seconds, or even up to like half a minute can become musical very easily.
It happens on different scales for us. I don't. I'm not sure I understood your question correctly, Tom. But
I suppose I'm interested in the way in that idea that it can convert almost anything into music.
Yeah.
To me, it just seems really magical. That why is that process in your brain to do that?
Well, that's pattern recognition. That is one of the default, things that brains do.
Yeah.
But so the danger for us, I guess, is even if we don't make repetitive music, even if we don't have loops in our musics, we listen to our songs 20, 40, 100 times in a row. So in that sense, it can become extremely frustrating and extremely boring for us after a while to listen to the same thing. Or it can even become like meta music, the repetition of our own songs, working on it, can hide too much simplicity, for example. It can become music because of our own repetition when we build it.
Yeah.
If you have this experience too.
I don't know. I've never really thought about it. Yeah, I mean, for me, the problem is with hearing things too much, I become bored. I would not the other way around. I wouldn't become more interested because I'm hearing it for a long time. I would become less interested. That's just because I'm impatient and I just want to get on with it. And I don't like to dwell on one state of the music for too long.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
Do you have that experience of when you learn to love an album? So you have an album, and the first few times you hear it, you don't like it, and then after you've heard it 20 times, I remember it was an enormous difference when you used to have to pay money up front to buy a piece of music. I remember I'd go to the shop and you'd buy an album for £6 or whatever an album cost then. And you'd spend all this money on it. You were going to listen to it at least like 6 or 7 times because you'd spend money on it. Whereas now you click on something on Bandcamp or whatever, you skip through a couple. Yeah, don't like that. Move on. And that process of learning music, I think, is also really interesting and must have
buying an album, a physical album, is a form of commitment as well. So you give yourself more time to appreciate it, I guess. And if it's too easy to skip to the next song because it doesn't cost you anything or it doesn't require any commitment, then you might lose out on experiencing some great music. So sometimes it's just good to give it a try, or multiple times.
I wonder if there are different
of this, Tom? Or
Sorry?
Do you have an example of this, like an album that you grew to love?
I think with loads of records, yeah. I mean, I'm thinking back to albums from a long time ago, but I think there's definitely lots and lots of music where I will hear it once, and you might be like, I am intrigued. I want to go and listen to that again, maybe. But then when you've listened to it 20 times, you think it's an incredible piece of music because you've learnt it. I mean, I think learning is the only way I can think of to say it. But
well, the other way of saying it is that you get like experience attached to it. Experiences or emotions. The more you listen to something, the more memories or the more external things that are outside of the music get associated to it.
Yeah.
But also, it's that whole tension between. I mean, that's on the album listening experience, but also on the creation of a little bit of music. The whole tension between. Sorry, I'm losing my word. Being able to foresee what's coming. Predictability and surprises, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just think psychologically it's really like I don't want to watch a film 10 times, but there are albums I've listened to 100 times, or more.
Yeah, but I think that's also the medium. Films are more, they're speaking to more than one sense. Like audio leaves room for interpretation. You can make your own images when you're listening to audio, and film basically occupies more of your senses, basically, and so it's more literal.
Yeah.
I mean, the story can still be something of a mystery or be open for interpretation, but it's vision and it's audio and it's more direct. And audio, it leaves way more room, especially electronic music or abstract electronic music leaves shitloads of space open for interpretation.
Yeah, no, that's true.
But I've experienced a lot was hearing music for the first time in a concert situation. Even here at Jerem, listening to a piece, a tape music piece, for the first time on the Acousmonium, so in a concert hall situation, and then re-listening to it to the exact same tape afterwards, and not even recognizing it.
Yeah. Oh well, there's so many things. I mean, how your brain can play tricks on you. I mean, your hearing is a very powerful instrument, but your brain and imagination is way more powerful, and that's how these things happen.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting, Megan, when you were saying earlier about how you're listening to, when you're making music, you will hear things within the music that then, is it things that aren't necessarily there that lead you to then try and create those sounds, or?
Yeah, and most of the times I'm trying to create them, or I have an idea of how I would like to sound to be. It's most of the times it's a combination between knowing it already and hearing everything about one sound, or I think, okay, this, for example, I choose a module, let's say rings, for example, of which I know can do the sound, but sometimes it's also what Jochem says, just use your imagination and let it how do you say that, evolve into something else. So it depends, I think. Yeah, I hear certain things, and other things um, come in later. Just
When you hear a new part that doesn't exist, but you hear it in your head on top of the music you have at a certain point,
sometimes, yeah.
where do you think this sound comes from?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah.
You mean, where do you think the sound in my head comes from?
Yeah.
Or,
Is it from your cultural background, your music culture?
that's a great question. I don't know. I think I always had it somewhere. When I was a little kid, I was always making sounds and always. I don't know. I think it has been there for a long time, but I've never thought about it actually.
You should talk to Elon Musk
Good
and get one of
question.
these brain connection things, so we can all enjoy the sounds you hear in your head.
Yeah, I will ask. I will text him.
I remember this scene from this a long time with ABBA. You might know the TV show Treme. Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, the New Orleans thing.
New Orleans, yes. There's a scene there that always intrigued me. A musician that invents a new song and he's very proud of it, and he like a singer-songwriter, and he plays it everywhere, and he's very proud of it. And suddenly someone not sues him, but claims the paternity of the song, and it's actually exactly the same song with the exact same melody in a different situation, and the musician is devastated because he thought this idea was coming from his head. Actually, it was coming from his memory or something. Where's the boundary?
It was the opposite of what happened to Paul McCartney. He basically woke up with yesterday in his head that he had written, kind of sat down and wrote it and set it down, and for weeks was like, well, obviously I haven't written this song. This is obviously something else. You know, I had to be persuaded that it was actually, he had actually
researched.
You know, you talk to people and they're like, no, I've never heard that before. That is, you know, I don't think that's something else.
Well, I mean, it says something about how instantly relatable that song is.
Mm.
You know, if even the composer thinks, "Oh, I must have heard this before." that's the ultimate relatability of a piece of music, right?
Thankfully, he didn't trash it.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But how does it work for you, Matthias, when you are creating music? Is it like you make something and then you always look for existing things you already recorded, or are you also doing that live, or are you also thinking about what fits?
Very seldomly. I mean, for my creative process, the weird position that I ended up in right now in my creative process, what works for me is not being the master of my own music. My music creates itself by like assembling stuff. I'm just a listener that like all the others who gets to decide this we keep, this we trash, or this we keep, this we trash.
Right. Okay. Well, then I think we're full circle, because you were really wondering about the sort of real-time intuitive nature of the way Megan and I put things together. But now you're saying that basically you are as much a spectator of what's happening when your music comes together as the performer or as the maker. Which essentially is the same, you know, because we get the thrill out of making something in real time, or more like in sort of recording mode, and then finishing it and putting it together, because you know it has that same aspect, you know, it has that same relationship with the music, because you are witnessing it becoming something as a spectator as well as the creator itself, you know. So you're both at the same time, and now you're basically telling us that's the process that you follow as well.
Je suis en live. Il faut que je parte.
Somebody wants the Synthi.
Yeah. Where's my Cindy? You have it.
An alarm of some kind. I don't know what it is.
Okay. Oh, don't worry, we don't hear it. Oh, do you have to go? Do you have to step out the building?
Apparently not.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
If you see smoke, run.
Yeah.
Oh, take the Cindy and run.
Yeah, take the Synthi and run.
No, I'll take the entire desk. It's going to take a while. I was feeling that in your approach of jamming with the instruments, you were more in control than what I am when I'm assembling.
Oh,
stuff. No. Okay.
No, there is like a Fingerspitzengefühl associated with it, you know, so like a sense of control, but and you can, but as much as you explore the range in advance of an instrument, you never really get exactly what you want, you know. It's still you're coming along on the ride, you know, and you're a spectator in a certain way as well. Anyway, yeah. Deep stuff, guys. Really enjoy this.
Interesting to know your way of working, Matthias.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting to know yours too.
Yeah. We're hitting 2 hours, people, and I think maybe we should go into the section where we can all make people aware of our current projects or upcoming things. Maybe Matthias wants to start and tell people where they can find your stuff, what you've got coming up or have done.
Yeah, sure. I have an album out that you talked about earlier.
Yeah, check it out, people.
Just Google my name, you'll find it easily.
Fair enough.
It's called The Geography of Absence. It's out this month on a Parisian label called Naal, and it should be in your shop, or ask for it if you want it, or it's online. That's the newest thing.
Cool, nice one. Tom, anything you want to share? Anything coming up for you?
I just, as I said, sort of two things that I sort of finally finished and published. I call it published because that's my background. So I didn't publish them really. I finished them and put them out into the world. That you can, so everything I produce you can buy from Thonk, as I said, in Brighton, who does ship to everywhere in Europe, and it does get to most people quite quickly. But the newest thing is that module, which is called Mini Drive, which is the drive circuit for a Mini Moog, and is a very small, easy, cheap thing to do if you've never actually made a DIY module yourself. It's probably the best way to start.
Awesome.
I must add something for Tom, because maybe you're too shy to mention it, but you guys should definitely check out Tom's Medium blog, which is absolutely awesome. A lot of very interesting projects. I just love going there, especially each end of the year, right, Tom? You have a list of things you learned during that year. It's hilarious and that's very serious and very informative. And I admire that your writings very much.
Oh, thank you. I will put a link. I'll put a link to that up that you can share as well for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the extra plug, Matthias. Megan, anything from you?
Yeah, I'm working on an album right now. And the rest I'm going to keep a little bit secret because it was the tip Sander gave me. No, I'm working on an album, which is a lot of fun, and I'm doing a project with an artist, a Dutch artist called Tjitske Oosterholt for duo Toon. And that's a collaboration between artists and musicians. So I will make a track and she will make an artwork based on the track. While we do it, I send her something and she sends me something, and then it gradually evolves to this collaboration, and that's what we are working on right now. So it should be finished soon, and then maybe there will be an exposition. You call it in English, an exposition, if we are allowed to. So I'm not sure yet.
Okay, sounds interesting.
What about you, Johan?
Well, there's always lots of things going on, but there are also some things I cannot talk about because they. But generally, yeah, I would say for this one, I would say check out our Discord server, because that's a nice place to hang out with people who are doing what we do, making music, just finding out about other people's music and, you know, music technology, inspiration, blah, 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 all that stuff. Really nice place to be. And the other thing that I want to bring under the attention is our Patreon page, where you can say hi and support us if you like these chats, or you can get sound packs in the higher tiers, or even masterclasses and stuff like that. So that's it for now, but I have a lot of stuff coming up, so I'll talk about it when the time is right for that. So yes, thanks again, Matthias, Tom, and Megan. Really lovely to have you as my guests, and really enjoyed the conversation. Oh,
Yeah, me too.
I hope you did too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was nice to meet you, Matthias.
Yeah,
and Tom.
nice to meet you all. So have a good night, everybody. See you later. Ciao, ciao.
Goodbye.
Bye bye.